All right, future private pilots, listen up. This is your mission briefing for one of the biggest hurdles you'll face, the private pilot oral exam. We're going to demystify this whole thing, break it all down, and give you a clear flight plan for success. Let's get started.
So, here's our game plan. We've broken this down into 4 main parts. First, we'll cover you and your airplane, making sure you're both ready to go. Then, we'll dive into weather, or reading the skies. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of planning a cross-country mission. And finally, we'll tackle the rules of the road for the National Airspace System.
First things first, pilot and plane readiness. This is really the foundation of every single flight. It's that go, no-go decision. And it's the very first thing your examiner needs to know. Are you and this airplane actually legal to fly today? And that leads us to this question, which I can almost guarantee will be the opener for your entire check ride. It's all about you. Can you prove right here and now that you have everything you need to act as pilot in command?
So, what do you need to have on you? Well, it's your pilot certificate, of course, a government-issued photo ID, and at least a third-class medical certificate. And you better have that logbook handy, especially if you need to prove any recent endorsements or your flight currency.
Let's talk about that medical for a second, because this is a classic trip-up question. If you are under 40 years old, your third-class medical is good for 60 calendar months. And that phrase, calendar months, is key. It means it expires on the very last day of the month, not on the specific date it was issued. That's a detail you've got to know. Okay, so you're legal. What about the plane? For the aircraft documents, just remember the acronym AERO. Now, it's not enough to just list these off. You need to know exactly where to find them in the airplane, because the examiner will ask. The airworthiness and registration, for example, have to be right there, visible for everyone to see.
Now for inspections. Oh yeah, your examiner is definitely going to dig into this. You have to know the difference here. Every single airplane needs an annual inspection every 12 calendar months, done by a mechanic with a special inspection authorization. But that 100-hour inspection, that's only for planes being used for hire, like the one you're probably training in. You need to be able to open up those maintenance logs and point to the sign-offs to prove that plane is airworthy.
All right, pilot and plane are good to go. Let's move on to our second section, reading the skies. Your ability to get a weather briefing and, more importantly, understand what it's telling you isn't just a skill, it's absolutely critical for a safe flight. We'll start with the METAR. Think of this as a snapshot in time. It's the weather intelligence report from the airfield telling you what's happening right now. It's not a forecast. You've got to be fluent in this language, able to decode winds, visibility, clouds, and the altimeter setting in a split second. Now, if the METAR is the now, the TAF is your crystal ball. It's a forecast that predicts what the weather is expected to do over the next day or so, right there around the airport. This is what you use for planning your whole flight, especially your departure and arrival. But you can't just read the first line of a TAF. You have to look for these change groups. FM means a big permanent shift is coming. Tempo is a heads up for conditions that might pop up for a little while, and prob gives you the percentage chance of something nasty like thunderstorms. Understanding these little codes is what makes a TAF so powerful. Okay, what about advisories while you're actually flying? You've got airmets and SIGMENTs. Think of it this way. Airmets are for us, in our smaller planes, things like moderate turbulence or IFR conditions. SIGMENTs, though, those are the big ones. They are a warning for all aircraft about serious hazards like severe icing that you just have to stay away from. Period.
And there are 3 flavors of airmets you need to have memorized cold. Sierra is for instrument conditions and mountains being obscured. Tango is for turbulence, and Zulu is for icing. Knowing Sierra, Tango, and Zulu instantly shows your examiner you know how to assess your risks in the air.
And that brings us to part 3, the cross-country mission. This is where it all comes together. You take your knowledge of the plane, the weather, and navigation, and you build a real flight plan. Your examiner is watching your process here very, very closely. So before any cross-country flight, the FAA says you have to be familiar with all available information. That's where NW Craft comes in. This isn't just a suggestion, it's your professional checklist to make sure you've covered all your bases, from runway lengths and fuel planning to checking for NOTAMs. So how do we actually find our way? Under VFR, we mainly use 2 methods. Pilotage is the simple one. You're just looking out the window, flying from one big landmark to the next. Dead reckoning is when you have to trust your math, using your heading, speed, and time to calculate where you should be. You'll need to know how to do both. And here it is.
the classic check ride scenario. You're flying along and suddenly you have no idea where you are. The examiner isn't trying to trick you. They want to see how you handle the stress. Panic is not the answer. There's a procedure for this, and they expect you to know it. And this is that procedure, the 5 C's. Climb, circle, confess, communicate, and conserve. You need to be able to rattle this off from memory. It's a logical, calm, step-by-step process that proves you can manage a tough situation with good, solid decision-making. For our final section, we're zooming out to the big picture, navigating the national airspace system. You can think of this as learning the rules of the road for the sky. You've got to know where you are, where you're going, and what rules apply to be there safely.
I know, this chart looks like a bowl of spaghetti at first glance, right? But it really just shows the different neighborhoods in the sky. Every class of airspace has its own set of rules for getting in, talking on the radio, and how close you can get to clouds. We're just going to focus on the main ones you'll be flying in. Knowing how to enter these areas is absolutely non-negotiable. For Class C and D airspace, the kind around most towered airports, you just have to establish two-way radio contact. But for Class B, the big, busy stuff, you need to hear the magic words from air traffic control. Cleared into the Class Bravo. Anything less than that is not a clearance.
So what if the weather's a little hazy, but not quite IFR? Well, you might be able to ask for a special VFR clearance. This lets you fly inside controlled airspace when the visibility is down to just 1 mile, as long as you can stay completely clear of clouds. But remember, you have to get a specific clearance from ATC to do it. Here's a super simple but critical rule for flying cross-country above 3,000 feet. If you're heading generally east, you fly at an odd 1,000-foot altitude plus 500 feet. Heading west, it's an even 1,000-foot altitude plus 500. Just remember, east is odd, west is even, best. It's a simple trick to help keep everyone separated.
And we'll end on this single, powerful piece of advice. Preparation is everything. When you walk into your check ride with your flight plan done, your charts all marked up, and your documents in perfect order, you're not just making the exam easier for yourself. You are sending a clear message to the examiner that you're a safe, competent, and professional pilot. So what will your preparation say about